Hey folks, cheers. Welcome to Fresh Tracks Weekly. You're stuck with me again. Marcus is on the mend. Surgery went well, but we didn't want to try prop him up here in a full leg cast and make him do this. So I told him that I'd do it for at least one more week, maybe even further. But he's wanting to be in here. He just isn't going to get to for a while. So I've went through and I've put together the news and highlights, the things that we think maybe will be worthwhile for your time to know about. Trying to find some that are a little more upbeat than the normal legislative stuff. And when we're all done, we're going to do a deeper dive with our buddy Jim Baichtal. Those of you who've watched our content know Jim is from Alaska. You see him on the Sitka blacktail hunts. You've seen him on a bison hunt with us, a pronghorn hunt. He's the guy with the big bushy beard and the old Hawken black powder rifle. Well, Jim has helped start a new group and is in the leadership of a new group called the Black-tailed Deer Foundation. So we're going to do a deeper dive about that and all kinds of other things related to black-tailed deer conservation. But today we're going to start with, well, Colorado. I promise you, this will be, I hope it's the only legislative one we're going to talk about. House Bill 1258. Colorado, right? Last November in the election, the crazy ideas of getting rid of lion hunting and all that got defeated. Great job, folks. Well, the groups who were behind all that don't want to be, I guess, don't want to leave the issue alone. They haven't had any luck with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. They haven't had any luck with the voters, so I guess they're going to go to the legislature. And what this bill does, the words shall and may are really important in law. Currently, the department shall use hunting, fishing, and trapping as mechanisms for wildlife management, the department being Colorado Parks and Wildlife. This bill would change it to the department may use hunting, fishing, and trapping. Well, if you look at all of the guidance, all the charter, all the administrative rule related to how Colorado Parks and Wildlife operates, if you change that to may instead of shall, it's going to create all kinds of ambiguities. It's going to bring in a whole lot of other stuff, and that's exactly what that side wants, because then they can litigate the heck out of it. So, if you live in Colorado, be contacting your elected official and let them know that you oppose HB 1258. That is really important. Now on the good news in Colorado, Colorado Parks and Wildlife recently completed bighorn sheep relocation, translocation, whatever you want to call it, a project near Pablo, P-A-B-L-O. I'm not sure how you guys pronounce that in Colorado. And so they took a bunch of sheep from over there. There's called the Rampart herd over by Colorado Springs. They captured 20 of them, did the whole testing and everything, make sure they're disease-free, put them in a trailer and hauled them down. And somewhere southwest of Pablo, however you guys pronounce it. And they're trying to reestablish another herd there, which is part of their work and their job of trying to reestablish as many herds as possible. And this is funded through hunter license dollars and a bunch of volunteerism by the Rocky Mountain Bighorn Society, which is Colorado's hunter-based bighorn sheep advocacy group. Now, if you like elk hunting in Wyoming, you might want to file this little nugget in your research. There's been another case of positive CWD on the feed grounds. The last ones we heard about were in Jackson. This one is in what's called the Dell Creek feed ground. Not too far from Jackson, maybe, I don't know, 70, 80 miles. Maybe not even that far cross country. Anyhow, they've found 2 cow elk there that tested positive. Not good news, given we know that CWD is always fatal to whatever animal gets it, and it spreads pretty quickly when you have artificial concentrations of cervids, elk being a cervid. So the Wyoming feed grounds are going to have this issue. Wyoming Game and Fish is taking this very seriously, and they're going to ask for a lot more compliance from us as hunters. So when they ask for our compliance and their help, that's our chance to be citizen scientists to some degree. We got to make sure we help them. Watch for a lot more related to that. Now in Idaho, they got a couple things going on. They have a non-resident tag issuance advisory group. Man, that's a long title. They've been meeting over the last year, and their last meeting was in December, where they adopted a new idea for how they're going to handle the general non-resident elk and deer tags that are this crazy fiasco that happens every December. We all get online and you put number 52,000 in the line, and when you get to the front of the line, they're all gone. Well, this advisory committee came forward with some recommendations, and I think it's going to require legislative action, but the 2026 non-resident tags look like they're going to be issued under a new system, the details of which aren't fully available to what I know of and what I could find here, but it's likely going to be some sort of draw for these general non-resident tags. And also in Idaho, they have seen declines in mule deer in the southern and southeast part of the state. So they put together, Idaho Game and Fish, put together a citizens advisory committee to give recommendations of how hunters think the department could address some of these issues where they're below objective. The committee had its final meeting, I believe that was also in December, where they provided 2 options for the department to consider. Just know that both options are probably going to result in fewer tags and probably a bit more restrictive either in season dates or weapons types and season lengths. So that's just citizens being involved and agencies working with hunters. So all good on that front, even if the news of lower mule deer numbers isn't good. And since we're on it's application season, probably throw another one in here about application for non-resident tags. Those of you who apply in Colorado, and Colorado hosts more non-resident elk, deer, antelope, everything else hunters than any state in the country, you might want to pay attention. They put together a citizens committee. I'm trying to remember what term they call that, but anyhow, they came up with their final recommendations, and starting in 2028, Colorado is going to change this preference point system that they've had, right? For those of you who know, a preference point is he or she with the most points is going to get the tag. And that's how all of the deer and elk and pronghorn tags have been issued in Colorado. Well, starting in 2028, they're going to take half of those, and they're going to keep the same system intact for half of them. But the other half are going to go over to a new system where your points become bonus points, which are pretty much like raffle tickets. So if you have 10 points and I got 3, you get 10 raffle tickets, I get 3, I could still win the raffle. So if you have points in Colorado, you might want to think about using those points before 2028. Because once the pool of tags that your preference points are competing for, once that pool gets cut in half, it's kind of like devaluing your points in half. Maybe not in half, but still devaluing them. So the Colorado application deadline for 2025 is April 1st. Anyhow, that's it. Hopefully we didn't depress you too much with all these legislative issues. We're now going to go where Marcus and I, the day before he blew out his knee, or 2 days before, something like that, had a great conversation with our buddy Jim Baichtal about black-tailed deer and the Black-tailed Deer Foundation. Here we go. Thanks for being here. How we doing, Marcus?
We're doing good. We have a special guest for Fresh Tracks Weekly this week.
Well, I don't know about special.
Jim Baichtal.
Yeah.
And we actually just recorded a podcast with you about the Black-tailed Deer Foundation.
And the kickoff of that in December.
Yeah. So if people want to learn about that, they should definitely go listen to the Hunt Talk podcast.
Yeah.
Go to blacktaileddeer.org, sign up.
Yeah, but for this, we figured we'd grab you for just a little bit of a shorter segment to talk about your new role as a commissioner for Alaska Department of Fish and Game, which is interesting. We talk about commissions frequently, I feel like, on this podcast and the decisions they make, and sometimes we're frustrated with commissions, but I think it'll be really interesting to hear from your perspective what it's like to be in that role. And Randy always talks about commissioners being a trustee for wildlife and the public trust and for the people of the state. So I don't know, I'm just genuinely curious what it's like to be in that role. And how did you end up in that position?
I was enjoying retirement one afternoon when my buddy Dave Brown called. Dave used to be on the board of game, and he goes, "The guy from Juneau's stepping down. You need to consider this." And I said, "Dave, I thought we were friends." Anyhow, we visited for quite a while, and then I talked to another half dozen people, and Karen and I had a couple days discussion, and I went and filled out an application. And then that application had to go, that was an application to the Board of Game, which is designated by the governor. And part of that was I got contacted by Safari Club International, Rural Hunters and Anglers, Alaska Outdoor Council, and a couple other organizations, and they didn't know who Jim Baichtal was, and they wanted to know who was going to be getting on the Board of Game. So I did a bunch of Zoom meetings with those guys. That this is what I believe in. And I said, I believe in science, and I'm going to listen to the science on this stuff, and that's who I am. I am a scientist, and I said, understanding the science isn't always perfect and stuff, but I said these were the things I believe in. And we had wonderful conversations. Eventually, all of those wrote letters in support. And then I had to go to the legislature, both the House and Senate, and be vetted in a meeting with those guys and take questions from that. And then they voted eventually.
Okay.
And then I got a letter from the governor saying congratulations.
So how many of you are there on the Alaska Board of Game?
There are 7.
7.
Currently, there's a vacant position, or possibly a vacant, because we have one of our members has got a bad medical situation going on right now and cannot attend the meeting. So the last Board of Game, there were 6 of us on there.
And is it by geography? By region?
Kind of by region. Like, I'm the only person from Southeast Alaska on there.
Okay. Because some commissions have to be representing this industry and this stakeholder group, and like maybe in Alaska, maybe there's some commercial fishing interests that have to be represented, or is that
no? That's on the Board of Fish.
Board of Fish. You're
Okay.
Board of Game.
We're Board of Game.
Interesting.
Cool.
Okay, so
We are not
I'm learning.
Board of Game and Fish. We are just game.
Cool.
So that's what's so interesting about this, because it's different in every state. And so, in Montana, our commissioners are, it's Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and they are commissioners for that whole entity. So I'm learning a lot.
But you can
already.
imagine with the commercial fishing aspect of things why the Board of Fish. In fact, Board of Fish meetings may be going on right now.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So we have 2 meetings a year. And we have a workshop day first, and then almost 10 or 11 days planned to hear 3 or 4 days of public comment. We've been given all the public comments that have come in through time, huge big binders, and we've got them digitally online and on tablets when we're there. We have the area. So like I used to be the East Prince of Wales Game Advisory Committee chairperson, which was 2 or 3 communities on Prince of Wales. Well, I think there's well over 120 of those across the state of Alaska. So the area committees.
They're a little more localized.
A little bit localized.
Yeah, that's another interesting aspect that we don't have in Montana.
And then those guys go through, they can comment on any proposals. Like the last go around, we had 85 proposals or something like that in the first meeting. They could comment on all of those, but they specifically focused on stuff in their area of influence around their communities or their village or whatever. And they would write up their pros and cons, and if they supported it or were neutral on it or were opposed to it. So we have that as information. We have all the public testimony that was written and sent in. We have all the public testimony that comes in. And then the way it's set up, Like we talked about your friend John, who's come in from Dillingham, because that's one of the, Unit 17 was one of the areas that we were making decisions on, things that he has authority over. The state of Alaska gives an overview for each area that they're responsible for. Both, here's the overall thing, here's all the animals, here's what's going on, the challenges that we have, and then several times there were researchers who would come and give presentations, and those would be hour-long presentations and stuff. And then for every single, if there was 20 things in John's area, I can't remember how many there were at that, but if there was 20 proposals specific to that area, they had a position statement from the state, whether they opposed it, were neutral, or supported it, and a PowerPoint presentation giving the background of what that moose population or caribou population was doing or anything like that. Then we take all the public comment. As commissioners, we take all the public comment, and we take all the AC's comments and stuff like that.
AC's being?
The area committees, those individual smaller area committees. And we talk amongst ourselves and debate the pros and cons of those things and let the public know, I'm kind of leaning towards not supporting this because of this and this and this, or supporting it because of this and this. And if for our instance, since there were 6 of us, it was a 3-3 vote, it failed. Or if it voted up or down, then that was what the outcome was. It was an incredible process.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So a lot of it would be like hunting regulations, like changes to hunting regulations. But then there's other, like, what are some of the other things that you would end up like, or like topic, I guess just categories rather? Setting
the threshold that would trigger the possibility of an intensive management plan. In other words, you're managed for moose populations between X and X in this unit. Well, some of the state wanted to change that because when they first started doing this is what they had as their objectives. Now that they've got enough census data for a long time, they knew that really we should have had our objectives down here. This is what the carrying capacity of the landscape is based on research over multiple years and maybe decades now.
Yeah.
And so they were asking for a permission to change that threshold value or zone, kind of a population range that would trigger or either turn on or turn off an intensive management plan for predators. So those were all in considerations. It could be not so much of an allocation thing, but more hunting periods. Like we liberalized a lot of opportunity for brown bears. We see changing climates. We see different, things showing up differently on the landscape than has been going on for a long period of time. And so now, if we stay to this period of hunting, those animals really aren't moving there at that period anymore. If we still want to have harvest occur in that herd or for that group of animals, then maybe we ought to think about this period of hunting or extend that. So those are all those kinds of decisions were being made.
Yeah, you guys also have to balance a lot of things that in the lower 48, we might hear Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has cooperative agreements with the tribes. But up there, your indigenous peoples have subsistence rights. Some of your rural people, whether they're indigenous or not, have subsistence rights. So there's a whole subsistence board also, and you guys got to take that into account because for a lot of your citizens up there, putting caribou or deer or moose or whatever in the freezer is way more important. I'm not trying to say it's less important in the lower 48, but the options a lot of your people have in Alaska are far fewer than what we have in the lower 48.
And those were definitely the public testimony is like, I'm not looking for a trophy moose. I just want to put a moose in my freezer. Can we liberalize? Is the population stable enough and growing enough and predictive enough? Can we liberalize a few more cow elk hunts or probably cow moose hunts in these areas? Or can we make it an any bull instead of 50-inch or better, those kinds of decisions. And so the federal subsistence and the state subsistence were there. All the directors of the state were there. both the conservation and actually the Doug Vincent Lang was there at the beginning of the meeting. We have the legal folks are there to say you can't go that way. This is the laws and the regulations and stuff, and like you can't make the decision you guys are going towards. And she keeps us legal.
Yeah.
Carolyn was wonderful. And then we actually have, which I really appreciated, we have the state troopers and a representative from the state troopers there.
Which in your state, the state troopers are also what most places they call them game wardens or conservation officers.
Right, and this guy was actually a brown shirt trooper, so he was a wildlife trooper.
Right.
But the troopers have the same authority. And they made comments on all of the proposals, like if you go down this road, could you tweak it to this instead of what's exactly being asked for? Because we're going to have a hard time enforcing what's being asked for, but if it's slightly changed to this, it is enforceable.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I think, Marcus, when you point out how every state is different.
Oh, yeah.
In Montana, we don't have these localized committees. They do in Utah. They do in Nevada. But we don't in Montana. So we've had times where a region that's one part of the state, we'll have a commissioner go and start messing with things completely on the opposite side of the state and just be like, well, that's what I think. So it doesn't have this governance where it kind of works it up from a local committee that then kind of ends up synthesized with what the bigger picture is, maybe statewide. And I look at some of the states, Alaska and Nevada, that have localized and then a tier structured. The infiltration of politics and elected officials to those commissions is less. And I don't know if that's just by accident or if it's just, look, you guys get so much public comment that starts right at the base and builds up that maybe the outcomes are more reflective of what the local people want.
I could definitely tell you that the carefully thought out responses of those area committees were heavily weighted in the decisions that we made.
Yeah.
Because that's the local people making that local
Right.
decision on the ground. And at the same time that group, however big that committee is, they were taking public comment and stuff too to get to that. And so, I mean, I think the thing that really came across to me is the weight that I felt on myself to very carefully consider all of the aspects from the public comment to the science behind what the state was providing. And it really comes down to, like, is that family maybe not going to get moose in their freezer?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, wow. It's very humbling. It was an amazing experience, and I'm looking forward to future meetings. I didn't know how I was, I went in there cold. I didn't know how I was going to come out, and I didn't know if Dave had thrown me a curveball or, but I'm very honored to be able to sit there on that commission.
Yeah. That's really encouraging to hear, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you is like, well, do you actually read the public comments? Because I think so many people submit public comments in their state and they're like, yeah, no, it's not, no one's even reading it. No one even cares. But obviously from what you've told us,
I'll tell you what, we got our binder a month ahead. And so we have all the public comment. Then we have all of the state wildlife comments on every single thing as well. And I tell you, I read every single word.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the other guys did, but I'm pretty sure they did too. And I thought I would have time to relax in the evenings. There was all these comments coming in and stuff. I spent all of my evenings reading.
Yeah.
I'd go down and have a very quick meal, and I'd go back to my room, and I'd sit there quietly, and I'd go through what I was going to cover the next day. And some of them had law cases that had been determined since that was maybe a 2017 meeting, and it had been gone through several lawsuits, and here was the findings of those lawsuits and how that was going to be relevant to the questions we have to answer the next day. And then you could question Carolyn or whoever was there and get that background. Because I don't I came into my first meeting with no experience in none of the previous meetings and stuff. Nice thing is all of those meetings are digital online, and you can go back and at least read the transcript, if not listen to.
Oh, I just checked. Yeah, you can listen to the audio. It's all
can listen to the audio.
archived online. Yeah.
And that was hugely helpful for me to understand how these things progress forward.
Yeah. Well, you're a scientist by training, Jim. So that is probably really helpful because you've always relied on science. And in the North American model, we have one of our tenets, right? Wildlife management based on science.
It says it right in the Alaska Constitution.
Yeah. And so Tony Wasley was in town last week. Tony is former director. He helped AFWA, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. He was the director in Nevada. He's now at the Wildlife Management Institute. And we were talking about how do we have like a model governance structure that we could give to all commission processes. Because a lot of times what we see is I don't think you're palling around with your governor, and that's why you got your position on the Board of Game. But in some states, we see that the closer you are to the governor, he or she handpicks friends. It becomes a spoil of victory, if you want to call it that. I think that's another thing in Alaska why you probably have less political gerrymandering influence, whatever you want to call it, because of how you have structured that. And the way how you talked about your nomination worked its way up, rather than a governor saying, yeah, well, Jim's my fishing buddy. He takes me out halibut fish, and I'm going to put him on the Board of Game. And in some cases, it's just that's how it works. So
it was not that way.
No. So I think what in that process, you end up with people who are more qualified as trustees for this really important duty, because you are the trustees of Alaska's wildlife. You're one of them. And you're accountable to these beneficiaries, the Alaska citizens, in a very significant way. And this is not something that should just be, this is my buddy, or this is my friend, or well, these people, they've got an economic interest, and I do some business with them. And
yeah, some of them have personal agendas that completely conflict with, what is the best for the citizens of that state, or the resource. And so that's where it becomes an issue, I think, where we witness that in other places. And that's where, sometimes it can be frustrating, but
no, I'm not
I like the idea of the advisory committees, and that just the kind of working up from the localized areas. I like that.
Yeah. That's cool. I'm not an outfitter and a guide. I don't have a dog in that fight.
Yeah.
And I'm a rural resident that listens to the communities on the island and throughout Southeast Alaska where I live, and I'm a hunter.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah, and you being on one of those local advisory committees for a long time, you understood how this process worked. It was, if you want to call it the farm team or whatever, it's a way for you to have developed an understanding and appreciation for what those local committees are doing.
I think a lot of times the local committees don't, at least speaking from my experience with that, didn't think the Board of Game paid that much attention to what we said, but I can tell you that they really do pay attention to what those ACs. If the ACs just say that we oppose it, but don't give the dialogue and stuff, that's one thing. But a lot of the ACs wrote lengthy. Here was our discussion.
Yeah. And when you say AC, you mean advisory
committee. Yeah.
Well, Marcus, we talked about trustee duties, public trust responsibilities, beneficiaries versus stakeholders. We've talked about all of it on Fresh Tracks Weekly, but I think it's great because very often when the topic comes up, it's because you see something that's really outside the boundaries of the normal public trust relationship. And now we have a chance to look at how Alaska does it. And maybe our point being that it can be done in the way that's responsive to the beneficiaries. It doesn't have to be done the way some states have just let the politicians grab it and run with it.
Right. And then I think, you mentioned this earlier too, that sometimes people just don't actually understand what their job responsibilities are, or they don't understand what their role is as a commissioner, and that who they're representing and how they're supposed to make these decisions. And so that's part of it. Is might be, like you said, you just need to have a framework in place so people actually understand what their duties are when they take that,
I had
take that role.
I had an idea of what it was going to be like, and it's a lot more intense.
Yeah.
And because I take it so seriously, and I can tell you what the other commissioners on there take it equally as seriously.
Right.
And they come from a mixture of rural and non-rural background and stuff like that, and they all come from different experiences in life, and they bring that to the table. Yeah. And I think it's an incredible process.
Yeah. Well, what Tony Wasley and I were talking about is how do we develop some basic framework that people, newly appointed commissioners, could either, I don't know if it'd be a class online or whatever, that they understand you are now a trustee and you have a relationship for the beneficiaries, every citizen of that state. And me, as a non-resident, I'm not one of your beneficiaries, Jim. I'm just a stakeholder who helps fund your agency, but in terms of where your responsibility lies as a trustee, it's primarily to beneficiaries. Stakeholders are off here on the side. They're the people you're doing transactions with and doing business with. And very often, trustees, some of them don't even know they're a trustee. They're like, well, I got appointed. So I think for the long-term feature of wildlife management based on science and the integrity of the public trust doctrine, I think we would be well served as hunters and anglers to start thinking about how do we start making sure that the governance of our commissions is as good as it can be, and that the people brought forward have a full understanding of what that involves, not just in all the the volumes of data they're going to have, but really who they're accountable to, what their responsibilities are, because it's a super important responsibility.
We have it in Christy, who is the board support staff. She's just an absolutely incredible. She put together a 2-day orientation and stuff. And
really?
Yeah, long before anything, and before we were still reviewing the first stuff. This is full month before our first meeting and stuff like that.
2-day orientation.
Yes.
Wow. As a commissioner.
A commissioner, here's the things that you're going to face. The woman from the legal aspect said, here's the statutes and stuff that you're beholding to, and here's the background on those statutes and how we got to that point. Yeah. And so that's all super important stuff to understand, but I didn't have context until all of a sudden I was sitting there in that seat.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down the first morning and the room was full and all the commissioners is there and all the state employees and all of this binders of information and tablets, digital tablets and stuff. And I went like, wow, I'm here. This is it.
I'm in the deep end of the pool. I better be swimming. Yeah.
No, but I mean, it was just, and then the reflection back on that experience. Karen, my wife, she zoomed in, and you can listen to the whole thing. It's I think it was being zoomed, and she had it on in the background, and she said, that was fascinating listening to all the presentations and the passion of the people giving the coming and doing the public testimony and that stuff. And she goes like, that just must have been incredible sitting there drawing that all in and synthesizing it and coming out with a personal, this is the way I think this thing needs to go.
Well, I like that you guys had a 2-day orientation. I'm not going to rat out any people, but I have asked some commissioners in other states what their orientation process was, and it was nowhere near a 2-day orientation process. We'll leave it at that. But I think...
And the other part of it, too, is I called past board members.
Yeah.
And past people that had been chair people on the board before, and I said, so what am I getting into?
Yeah.
What's my responsibility? What's my role and responsibilities? I value your opinion. Can you share that with me? And I had lengthy discussions. Because I didn't want to go into this thing half-assed.
Yeah. Well, let's leave it on a positive note. I was going to interject something about if you want to zoom into this other state and watch. I refer to it as the Commission Clown Show. But I'm not. Let's not go there. You guys in Alaska.
Zoom into Alaska's meetings. We got one coming up at the end of March.
There you go.
Statewide.
And I think Fresh Tracks Weekly is a place where we should continue to push this and explore this to show people that it can be done in a really good way.
Right. Yeah. And just trying to understand the process, because I'm still learning every day about just, like you just the difference between the game board and the fish board. Like I didn't even know that there was a separation. Like, and so just little things like that, just like how decisions actually are made, where you actually can submit your public comment, how you can make a difference. All of that just intertwined together, just trying to understand this whole process, because it's not simple. It's very complicated to, if you've never been involved with it, then it's hard to know how to participate.
I think it's really important, that participatory part of that. I think people don't think they can make a difference. Mm-hmm. It was always mostly individuals who put that. There were some state proposals that came forward because they wanted to make some changes, and some ACs, the area committees, put in proposals that they'd all come up with and stuff, but majority of that was individuals saying, like, I can't get caribou anymore because they don't come through these weeks, they come through these weeks. Can we shift the season over a little bit if the herd could take the pressure? And I mean, that they thought that if you think you can't make a difference, you can make a difference, because at least it gets discussed, it gets considered. You may not like the results. It may not be accepted for a myriad of reasons, but you can make that difference. Put that proposal in.
Great advice.
Great note to end on. I
There you
appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. And
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
It's a lot of fun.